Hi, my name is Alice Draper, and I'm about to have a productive conversation with Mike Vardy.
Welcome to A Productive Conversation. I'm Mike Vardy. Today's guest is someone who's not only helping people get on top podcasts, but helping them reframe how they approach visibility and rejection altogether. Alice Draper is the founder of Hustling Writers, a podcast guesting agency that's landed clients on shows in the top 0.1%. She's also the host of My Rejection Story, a podcast that features bold and candid conversations with people like Neil Patel, Gay Hendricks, and more. In this conversation, we talk about the real cost of self-rejection, the link between imposter syndrome and identity, and how a well-crafted podcast pitch is actually an act of vulnerability. Alice also shares her thoughts on journaling, community, and why rejection should be something we aim for, not avoid. Let's dive into this powerful and practical conversation right now with Alice Draper. Alice, thanks so much for taking the time to join me today and have a productive conversation with me.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you for having me, Mike.
I know this is pretty typical for people when they're listening to podcasts. Are like, who is this person? What brought them to this show and to have a productive conversation with you? So I'll let you kind of lean into it a little bit. For those that aren't familiar with you or your work, can you share a little bit about not only the work that you do, but also what led you to that work? Most people think it's a direct path. That's the assumption. They see where you are and they go, oh, well, that it was pretty much a straight line. In most cases, it's not. We often hear that. So a little bit about you, and then, maybe some of the things that waylaid you along the way to get to where you are now in terms of what you're doing.
Yes, of course. And I wish it was a straight line. I think we all do. But yeah, if you had to ask me 10 years ago if I would be doing what I'm doing now, the answer would be unequivocally no, because I had no clue that these things even existed. So I guess I entered my professional world as a freelance journalist, and I now run a podcast guest booking agency, which essentially means we work with people who are often entrepreneurs, authors, consultants, speakers, and book them to speak on other people's podcasts so that they can attract new leads into their business, attract new listeners for their own podcast, attract readers for their book, whatever it is that they're trying to get out there into the world.
Mhm.
So that's the business side. And the other side is that I also host a podcast called My Rejection Story. And my big passion is talking about all things rejection. I think that people who do well in life are people who have a new relationship with rejection or a unique relationship with rejection, where it's not that they don't feel it or get affected by it. It's that they know they have the tools to work with rejection and do things in spite of all the pain, and I guess also become more resilient to it. And Mike, you asked kind of to share a little bit on the non-linear path of how I guess
Mhm.
I ended up
Yeah.
here. I I was a freelance journalist. I was freelancing when I was in university and when I graduated university, and part of the freelance writing led me to coaches who I was doing all their copywriting for, and they saw me simultaneously pitching myself to magazines and writing for magazines, and they were really interested in publicity. And one of their requests as a couple of clients was, can you pitch us? Can you pitch us to where you're getting pitched? And can you pitch us to podcasts? And I had never ever thought of pitching a podcast before, but I thought it can't be that different. And so I started pitching podcasts, and the podcasts accepted them and they were really excited about this. And they became a lot more excited about this than the other copywriting work I was doing. And they started referring new clients. And yeah, and that's kind of my entry to publicity. And I guess I'd been doing publicity for myself for so long, and I knew how important it was in my own personal brand and my own visibility, and it was a natural segue to start doing it for other people. A load of fun. And yeah, I think a pitch can open up many, many doors. And so I guess I ended up here by accident, but I'm loving it.
It's funny because a lot of us, I know I didn't necessarily shoot to become like, oh, you're going to be a productivity, strategist or what have you. It just kind of went that way. And as we're recording this, we just had my book launch party yesterday locally. And one of the things that came up in the conversation afterwards was this, not just rejection was part of it, because obviously as a writer, once you put something out in the world, it's no longer yours and you are leaving yourself open to criticism and all of that. And one of the things that came up post, party, a couple of friends were over and we were having a glass of bourbon. We were just chatting about it, was this idea of imposter syndrome and how uh, it keeps us kind of in place in some instances. What's the role that you found with rejection and imposter syndrome? Because they have a link for sure.
Yes, absolutely. I think that imposter syndrome is the result of imposter syndrome is self-rejection. And that to me is the most insidious form of rejection. I would much rather people go out and get rejected by everyone else in the world, but not themselves. And unfortunately, feeling a lot of imposter syndrome, it will make it harder to put ourselves in the wake of rejection. So they're definitely very tied. And I think that's why you would say, if we look at the studies around imposter syndrome, you can say that people who are more marginalized often have higher levels of imposter syndrome. And that would probably correlate also to people who are more marginalized are more likely to self reject. So more likely to not put themselves out there. So that's thinking, maybe I think the studies are like, women experience higher rates of imposter syndrome, but everyone experiences imposter
Mhm.
syndrome. I just think that there's a muscle. And so if we think like people who perhaps have seen people like them go out and get rejected and be okay, they might have that, I guess, social proof that they can too. So if you think of like a family of entrepreneurs, perhaps you're
Right.
born into a family of entrepreneurs, if you've seen your family get rejected from these big business proposals they put out and still be okay and still get one idea to work and then get really rich, you might be someone who's more willing to take risks in later in
Mhm.
life because you've seen it work out. And I think that the same can be applied to imposter syndrome. If people like you haven't really taken risks or you haven't seen people like you do the thing you want to do, you are likely to experience higher levels of it. And there is a little bit more to overcome there.
So self-rejection, exploring that concept a bit more deeply. How, like, you're a writer as well, which is interesting because to me, one of the ways through that is the act of journaling, is the act of, like, again, self-reflection, because again, it kind of rhymes with rejection, but this idea of, um, to your point, you grew up in a family where rejection is something that they experienced and they just water off a duck's back, or it seemed to be water off a duck's back. So you have a resilience that's built to it. Do you think that journaling is one of those things that can, help strengthen your resilience and galvanize you when you are facing with rejection, which happens in a variety of forms, but especially self-rejection?
Before I ask that, I'd love to know what about journaling makes you feel like it helps get through the rejection? Like, have you ever, because I think I know why journaling helps, but I'd love to know when you journal, what are you getting out of it that
It's
makes you think, okay, I'm going to try again?
it's a form of self-talk that allows me to kind of get perspective, I think. And so I talk myself through the form of writing, and I actually dictate my journal entries a lot too, through that kind of fog, so to speak. Um, that's one. Especially if it's unfamiliar territory or it's territory that I am maybe uncomfortable with, which there are more of that than most people would like to admit, myself included, but also maybe not unfamiliar, but it's been something I haven't experienced in a while. So again, book writing, you know, when you publish a book or you publish, like, it's different than publishing a blog post, or it's in print, like it's out there. You've kind of planted your flag. And I think that one of the reasons I believe, and I might be wrong in this, is that you see books come out once every year or once every couple of years from authors, is that it's the muscle. Like, if I keep doing this, I already have proof that I can do it. So that proof, not social proof so much, but just the proof of accomplishment, can kind of keep it at bay. And journaling, I think, can be the kind of bridge there. It can talk you through the, yeah, you did this. You're Mike, yeah, you haven't written a book in a while, but the last time you wrote one, it felt really good. And yeah, you will get some rejection, but if you're trying to write something for everybody, then you're writing for no one. Like that kind of self-talk that most people reserve for social media, unfortunately. And then you get this weird. I'd rather have the echo chamber in my own, being able to read off of a sheet of paper and come back to me, or read off an app, than opposed to putting it out there. So I think that's a really good big part of it.
Yeah, yeah. So being able to talk to yourself, that self-talk is really important. And I think it's important because you are cultivating self-awareness. And something I have noticed in people who are rejection resilient is they're self-aware. And it's something that it's very hard to decipher why some people are more self-aware than others, but there are things we can do to be more self-aware, and journaling is one of the most effective ones because we're now noticing the patterns, we're introspecting about why I don't want to do this thing or why it makes me feel uncomfortable, and the minute we introspect, we can really like detangle what's happening and diagnose the problem, and once we've diagnosed a problem, we can address that problem more effectively. So that is my theory about why journaling is very effective. I think it cultivates self awareness, but it could also be that it gets you into action mode. And I can talk about that. I think getting into action mode rather than just, I guess, deliberating and not doing anything is also a very helpful tool that, because I think many of us think we need to feel ready or we need to feel resilient to rejection. And rarely that comes. It's more just do it before you're ready and you'll become more resilient over time.
I was going to ask you this, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but I love asking questions that I think I know the answer to anyway. But the idea of, we tend to work linearly, right? Like, I have to feel, everything has to be lined up so that I can. But so many things don't happen in a sequential order, right? I mean, especially when, so when you're thinking about rejection, or even, I mean, even the writing process, people assume, like, there's assumptions that, oh, you wrote that from chapter 1 to chapter 10. No, I wrote chapter 4 first, and then I wrote the introduction, then I wrote chapter. How can you write out of order? I'm like, because either the feeling, the vibe wasn't there for chapter 1 yet, or I was very certain about what chapter 4 needed to be. So because I had less ambiguity around it, I was able to do that first, and I could draw the connective tissue. But what this leads to, and this dovetails nicely into the question of people who want, either think about things in a linear fashion because it's just, it's a simple way to think about it, but also trying to do the shortcuts, trying to short circuit, like shortcuts can often lead to short circuiting. And I wonder, for those that are listening that think, well, how do I hack rejection? Like, how do I make it so that I don't have to go through it to be able to deal with it? And maybe you can share a story where either you tried to do that, or you recognize that you had to go through it, the rejection fully, in order to come out on the other side more resilient than before. Because we live in a world, for productivity's sake, where it's like, how can I hack this? How can I shorten the amount of time between point A and point B? How do I become more efficient? But again, efficiency is done wrong is not efficient. So can you dive into that a little bit about the shortcuts to kind of being resilient with rejection, and how, again, I mean, the reason I'm better at it than I was before is I just had to go through enough of it. And also I'm older now, so wisdom can play a role as well, I would imagine.
Yeah, life experience definitely plays a big role. I think that if you're trying to hack it by the means of not experiencing it, you probably are doing getting rejected less than you should be, because I think the hacking in most of the times, at least at what I've seen, translates into avoidance. So it's like I hacked it, or maybe you're in sales, for example, and you hacked it. You hacked it by not feeling that rejection that was so horrible from some prospective clients. If you think that that was your hack and you're still getting rejected a lot, I mean, that's something that I don't see a lot. I see kind of I will now put whatever barriers I can in front of me and that potential rejection. I might not be direct. I might not ask for a sale directly. I might beat around the bush and, like, I don't know, approach it in a different angle so that I don't get that blow. And if we think of, like, dating, how often someone who does not have a lot of rejection resilience, is perhaps not that confident, because I think there's a strong correlation. Instead of outright asking the girl out, he might try figure out a bunch of other ways whether she's interested or not. So maybe it's like, I will compliment her shirt, and maybe I'll drop a text that's very ambiguous, and do a whole bunch of very non-direct things so that there is always room for doubts about whether you were rejected or not because you never outright asked. So I don't know. That's at least what I've seen. I think that people either get rejected and learn how to deal with it. And getting rejected, usually, in order to build rejection resilience, it needs to be in alignment with you. So getting rejected for who you are, the values you stand for, things you care about, and not just getting rejected for a facade you're putting on, um, is, I think, the most effective way to build rejection resilience, sadly.
I want to shift gears and talk about, because this is also related, is the idea of when you pitch. So you're doing the pitching for, like, writers are, at least historically, it's a solitary craft. They want to write, they want to put the stuff out there, and they don't want to have to market it or pitch or anything like that. It's just like, hey, let me do my craft, and then please just let me do my craft. I don't want to have to do anything else. I mean, and again, I'm being general here, but a lot of that was the job. Marketing, all that stuff wasn't part of the job. There were people that they were gatekeepers that you could, either they had to go through those, so you didn't really have access. We it's more Wild West now in terms of, like, again, podcast, great example. Like, I get numerous requests to be on the show, and it's often not coming necessarily from the authors or from the people themselves. It's through an agency or through a representative. So based on your rejection story and based on your ability to, like, handle rejection and navigate it, you now teach people, and you actually have this where you're like, hey, we'll help you pitch and soften maybe the blow that they might feel otherwise, or they're not experienced. They haven't exercised that muscle. So for somebody who is interested in pitching and they are, they've never really gone down that path before, because it's not that they're afraid of being rejected. It's just, it's not something that they even considered that they had to do. What are some of those things that they can do to kind of strengthen their pitch and make sure that they go in with the best foot forward? Because you mentioned, the idea of a salesperson that, they hack rejection, by avoidance, right? So one way of avoidance, and this is, again, kind of an interesting way, is rather than pick up the phone and call somebody, they email, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
which we
It's
all
less
know.
vulnerable.
Because there's a the vulnerability aspect, but also, if they say no, it's keyboard to keyboard, it's digital tool to digital tool. You don't feel it as personally, because, there are people who, they take it really, really personally when they are rejected. The good that they're selling or the service that they're offering, if they are rejected, instead of saying, well, they're rejecting the product or the service, they go, oh, they're rejecting me. Right. And so this is something they haven't exercised. So how do you help people, maybe some things that they can start to do that will allow them to start to exercise that muscle so that they can move forward with more confidence, with more clarity, and with more resilience in the face of rejection?
This is a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, because I think there is a hack. There is a way of hacking rejection, and that hack is community. So you touched on writing being historically a very solitary practice. And I think that the nature of the solitary practice of sitting behind your keyboard, doing it all on your own, is why so many writers struggle with rejection, struggle with marketing themselves, struggle with all the other parts outside of writing their story, which is getting the work out there. And if we trace back humans hundreds of years ago, we have an evolutionary drive to be accepted by our communities. Because if I was rejected by my community, well, I wasn't around hundreds of years ago, but if my ancestor was rejected from the community hundreds of years ago, because they didn't do their job right or for whatever reason, that could mean being ousted from the community. It could mean going without food, going without shelter, going without safety, maybe having to find another community or another island to join a part of. So it's really hardwired. The brain's amygdala takes over, a fear center overrides us, and that's an evolutionary hardwire so that we don't get pushed out of the community. So the best hack is find your community, even if you're a writer. Writers don't have to be solitary. They can have a community of other writers. And that was my first rejection challenge came through a writing community where it was a push between us writers to get 100 rejections in a year. And what that does is that every time I got rejected and I shared it with the community and the community supported me, it reminded that part of my brain, I'm safe. I'm not getting rejected. They're not kicking me out. And the same thing, on their side is seeing these veteran journalists who are writing for much, much bigger magazines than me, talking about getting rejected from the same place that rejected me and being proud of it made me think, okay, clearly it's not the end of the world that I also got rejected from that magazine. So yeah, community would be a big, big one. And I think it can also help with you spoke about what is the best way of putting your best foot forward. It can help with that because your community can help you write a damn good pitch, improve your pitch, and
Hmm.
increase the chances of success.
So you brought up something really interesting because the vulnerability aspect is huge in community, right? Like you have to be willing to be vulnerable because I wonder if people don't share rejection stories because of the shame associated with it. Like they go from uh, being rejected and it just spirals into shame. Um, and like I know that when again, I'll speak from a writer's perspective. Uh, Getting a 1-star review on Amazon is humbling. But if you spin it, so go from, and I think curiosity plays a role in here too, as opposed to judgment, because judgment can lead you down that path, whereas curiosity. So my question now for someone who leaves a 1-star review for any book, really, is um, they took the time to do this. Why? Like, the fact they took time means there was some value in it to them, whether it was value of sharing with others, hey, don't buy this book, buy this one instead. Like, instead of framing it as my book sucks because I got a 1-star review, uh, or oh my God, this 1-star review is dragging down my overall rating. Hey, everybody, please give me more 5-star reviews, which you don't want like disingenuous 5-star reviews either, because that's also, I think, a form of rejection in a way. I think it's a form of rejection in terms of a lack of authenticity, because the community can be helpful, but you also want to make sure that they're being honest with you. So to that end, for the shame that can show up and the misunderstanding of what rejection can take, what are some of the things that people can do to make sure that they don't, again, spiral into shame or regret or doubt? And because that will cause people, I think, to withdraw from the very community aspect that you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. Um, I'm are you still seeing me?
I can still see you. You're good. You're good.
Or
Yeah.
okay, okay. Sorry, I just froze for a second.
Nope.
It's a great question. I I urge you, Mike, to do something when just in relation to your 1-star review, is I urge you to open Goodreads and type in your favorite your favorite book title, and then tap the 1-star icon and take a look and all the one-star reviews they most likely have if it's a popular book, because if it's got hundreds of thousands of list reads, it's going to have a whole bunch of one-star reviews, no matter how good you thought that book was.
All right. So I'm looking at Cal Newport right now. Sorry, Cal.
None of
Uh,
that.
so if I go to deep work and then I can click on him as an author, right? And how do I see their one-star reviews? I see like a bunch. I see the overall rankings. Oh, just pick whatever book I want, right? So
Yeah, so pick a book and then
I'm going to pick
you
deep work.
search
I'm
more.
going to pick deep work,
Okay, awesome.
and I'm going to go to the reviews. And I think you can see it from here. No, it's not giving me the. Oh wait, at the bottom, there is the 1-star review. There are 2,204 1-star reviews for deep work.
Yes. And
Wow. Now, the 5 stars, there's 76,840. So basically, so much of them are not 1-star. Even the 2-star reviews are yeah, see, one 1-star review is, I do not have time in my life for books that hold up a certain person as a positive role model, abandoned. Like, so there's no context behind it, right? Interesting. So yeah, you're right. I should look up mine in a minute, but nonetheless.
so here's the thing. Being visible means you are not going to be liked by everyone. If everyone who likes you, if you are only getting 5-star reviews in your book, the sad reality is it probably means your audience is not huge. You, as soon as you are in front of like tens of thousands of people, there are going to be people that don't like you. And that's a reality of being visible. You cannot appeal to everyone.
Right.
So I think that remembering that is a sign, do you care about what you want enough to withstand potential rejection? Because that's a big thing that I've noticed just in the conversations I've had on my podcast, is that some people really struggled with rejection until they found a cause or a piece of as a craft that they cared about enough, like writing their book, in
Mm-hmm.
order to withstand that rejection. So finding that thing that you are willing to take the heat on for, because if you are going to be visible, it's not all going to be good, is definitely a big one. And then I was recently on Sarah Rice's podcast, and for those who don't know her, she got famous on MTV's The Challenge, and she was like on a bunch of seasons. And she spoke about in that interview, she spoke about how she got all this hate for being on reality TV and
Right.
how awful that made her feel, because she was like 22 years old. And the thing that she did, because I actually asked her, what did you do in order to navigate like the slew of online hates, which I think is much more rejection than any normal person experiences. And for her, it was turning towards her real community, like her real friends, her family, the people that actually interact with her on a day-to-day basis. And I'd say, to your question, being able to step back, know why you're doing this thing is always important. Know why you're putting it out there, and being prepared to experience some hate that would come with being visible. But then when that hate comes, is turn to your real people, the people that actually know you, the full spectrum of you, and not this one-dimensional or half a dimensional version they're getting from reading the first 10 pages of your book, and maybe they don't like you because you are someone that reminded them of someone they didn't like, and whatever it is. Like,
Mhm.
there's a million reasons why someone could judge you and not like you in a split second.
Or they just
But
had a bad day. They just had a bad day. Like, sometimes it's just that, right?
yeah, absolutely. There are so many personal reasons why someone would personally not take to a person, but do they know this full spectrum of you? And, you want to think about who are the people that know the full me, the people that have maybe known me for decades, my partners and stuff. those are the people you should be turning to for support when and if you experience some negative backlash online.
Alice, this has been a great conversation. I want to be respectful of our time. And so before we wrap up, somebody has listened to the show. Many somebodies are listening and are listening to the show right now. And they're like, okay, so how do I get started? Like, how do I get started with navigating rejection? Obviously, I'll have you share at the end, where people can find your work and such. But if they want some quick action, a simple action they can take right now to kind of get the ball rolling, what would that be?
So you touched on it being vulnerable to find a community, but I would urge the listener to be vulnerable, to grab their WhatsApp or their Messenger app or whatever it is and message 2 or 3 people who have similar goals to them and say, hey, do you want to be my rejection accountability buddy? And set a rejection goal. That's what I did. So I'll always, I'd recommend that. And you could say, I want to get 100 rejections before the end of the year or before next year this time or whatever it is. And those 100 rejections could be for potential clients for your business or for potential speaking engagements because you want to go do keynotes. If you can find a goal that could be rejection oriented, that's a quick action step. And once you've set that accountability in place, you found someone who also wants to do this thing because then they have incentive to join you. They also maybe have been too scared to start approaching for new clients for their business or too scared to pitch partnerships or whatever it is they're working on. They most likely will say yes. I mean, in my experience, people say yes. And if they don't, try find someone else. Try ask in a Facebook group. I think that people are often looking for someone to help them get their stuff out there. And the best way is to do it with someone because you're not alone. You have the accountability and you also will feel safer chasing those goals.
Alice, it's been a great conversation. Thanks so much for taking the time today. Where can people keep up with you and the work that you're doing?
Thank you so much, Mike. This has been such a great conversation. So thank you for having me. To keep up with me, I think my newsletter could be a great place. If anyone wants to pitch podcasts, we share 3 different podcasts that are currently accepting guests every week. So that's hustlingwriters.com/templates. And then you can get the template that I use for all my clients to pitch podcasts. So that would be there for free. So that's the best place. But otherwise, if you just search my name on LinkedIn, Instagram, or search the podcast, My Rejection Story, you'll find me.
Alice, thanks so much for having a productive conversation with me today.
Thank you for hosting this conversation and having me here.
Thanks to Alice for joining me for this conversation. You can find all of the relevant show notes, links, everything, wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're doing that, you can also subscribe to the podcast. Just Spotify, Apple Podcasts, doesn't matter, even YouTube. Subscribe to the show. That way you won't miss a single episode of what's to come. If you want to dive a bit deeper into the show notes and you want to explore the website, you can go directly to this episode page on my website, mikevardy.com/podcast 607. That's it for this episode. Thanks so much for joining me for a productive conversation. Until next time, I'm Mike Vardy, reminding you to stop doing productive and start being productive. See you later.